All right. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Some tech issues here, but we should be okay. Yes, maybe we have to share your screen and maybe use your video. So yes, I was talking about Ramesh. Did you hear me from the beginning? I hope so. Great. So just running through the panelists. So we'll have Ramesh take us through the impact-based forecasting. Then within the second component, we'll have Phoebe to take us through how the messaging moves within the DRM circle disaster management structure. Phoebe works with the UNDRR. Then we'll have Emmanuel and Tale from Uganda Red Cross, more focusing on the last mile, looking how do we leave no one behind. Then we'll have Saskia as the last speaker on looking at integrating water quality into the early warning information flow, more looking at the learnings that we can integrate within this early warning framework. And lastly, we will have the closing remarks from Teddy. Thank you, everyone, and you're most welcome for the session. And now I'll hand over to York to take us through the problem statement.
Yes, thank you very much. The problem is quite clear that the funding gap for humanitarian affairs is so huge that we really have to find a different solution and go to the early warning. But that's easier said than done because we run in a lot of challenges, and that's what I wanted to address the next few minutes. The impact of climate change is obviously everywhere, but it's much larger in the middle income and low income countries. But also the challenges that are here in how do we get the message across, how do we warn people. That is a problem we are facing everywhere in the world, also in the Netherlands. And that's actually quite weird that we are still facing that problem, because in the Netherlands, we had to fight the sea for already more than 1,000 years. And that brings me actually to the first challenge, the poor coordination for a really systematic approach. Several government agencies have their own goals and live in their silos, and therefore in their communication, a lot of times things can go wrong. And you don't only see that in the day-to-day practice when there's something happening, but also if you try to come up with solution, because we really want to do something about this as the Netherlands. We know a lot about water, therefore we choose water as one of the biggest challenges to fight. And we had a program called Water at the Heart of Climate Action, and it kind of brings together partners like the Systematic Observation Finance Facility, UNDRR, the Federation of Red Cross, to get actually from a satellite up high, the send back on the ground. But then you see that those different organizations work in different ways, and gluing them together was actually quite a challenge. And then it helps that if you're a donor and you have enough sufficient money to put in all those different areas of such a program to make it work. But you see, they need the kind of incentive to work together, because it's not always the reflex, unfortunately. So the coordination is the first challenge. The second one is the poor investment. And it's not only the poor investment in the hydromet capacity, but especially in the risk-based decision-making. The data is there a lot of times, but it's also about applying the data. For example, applying it to traffic control in the Florida Keys or the dam operations in Bangladesh. If you don't act on the information is useless. And the third challenge is there where we have proper early warning systems, that they aren't designed about users. I would, for example, get in Rotterdam a warning like the sea is rising, but then my reflex could go that I want to flee the city. But actually, if I flee the city, I'm getting lower instead of higher. So they shouldn't say the water is rising, they should focus on the user, stay in the city, look for high ground, go to the second floor of buildings, etc., etc. The fourth challenge is that often there are community-based early warning systems because communities that were struck by disasters want to be prepared to the next one, and they organize it locally. But since they are informal and not recognized by government, it's hard to connect them to national warning systems. And even in the Netherlands, it would be forbidden for our Met officers to directly have a line with them. They can only have, due to legislation, an open source complex database that everybody can use. But yeah, it's easy to use by a big commercial firm and harder to use by a community-based organization which is trying to protect its area. The fifth challenge you can see on this slide is that often we focus on the short-term responses instead of the resilience, and it's very human to do so. But the vulnerable communities are living with a myriad of water-related challenges: too little water, too much water, poor quality water. And if we only solve the acute problem, they will stay forever in that position. And if we're talking about too much water, then one of the solutions often is the sandbag, which I use as a metaphor during my presentation, is that then it is provided in an ad hoc position, but it would be much wiser if they would invest beforehand in a center where you could get sandbags, that people from a community know where they have to go, instead of if there is something that people don't know what to do, and making them prepared for what's coming up. The last, but definitely not the least, actually the most important one, is that solutions are unfortunately not locally led most of the times, because the underserved communities are often not at the center of all development agendas, decision-making processes and actions. Women, children, refugees, elderly, and other marginalized groups. And decision makers think that they know what's best, and politicians, especially, I've been a politician, a member of parliament, and I've thought about all kinds of solutions, but you only know it if you talk to the communities, because again, the metaphor of the sandbag, I could say, okay, sandbags is a solution to fortify your front door, but if you live in a shack, fortifying your front door won't do the job, we all know. So we have to involve also the underserved communities to see what does work as a measure in their areas, because otherwise they will again and again be disproportionately affected, and that's the last thing that we want. So for me, it was easy to post the challenges. So now we'll hear, hopefully, also a solution to those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jock, for unpacking for us the solutions related to different, very much interlinked to the risks, and also the different components of the early warning system. I'll now welcome Bettina to take us through the cartoon gallery. Welcome, Bettina.
Thank you so much.
Participants. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I hope all of you online, you're ready for some action. We heard that we are navigating complexity on multiple levels. Just now we heard the challenges and coordination and bringing a lot of different stakeholders together. The challenge around information and how to best act on information. And of course, early warning systems and how to really make them applicable and effective. And because we have these layers of complexity, for the past couple of years, we have actually worked with a whole range of cartoonists. There are cartoon artists that work for the New Yorker and other magazines, and are really helping us see what is happening in our conversations and point the finger to what we are maybe not seeing. So humor can help to have more candid dialogue, to have more complex conversations, and to have a fresh perspective. So I hope you can navigate to the QR code. Maybe we can see the QR code again briefly, if that's possible. If you could navigate to the QR code and enter the cartoon gallery, you'll see what you see here on screen. Please, first of all, enjoy the cartoons. There are 12 of them from different artists. And then please share with us a couple of thoughts you may have. Comments. Do you find this cartoon insightful? Does it remind you of something in your practice? We'd love to hear from you. And we'll just take a couple of minutes now for you to look at the cartoons and enjoy them. And then we'll move on and we'll leave the cartoon gallery open until the end of today. So if you want to, you can go back there afterwards and have a look. Thank you so much. And please enjoy the cartoon gallery and keep the comments coming. Maybe a quick question. Can we paste the link also in the chat? Are participants able to see the chat? All right, I see some are logging in. Fantastic. I see some comments coming in. Really nice. Please also feel free to share if you're struggling with any comments or you're not agreeing with what they're saying. See, some are resonating. Fantastic. A couple more minutes left for you to enjoy the cartoons. Thanks for posting the link in the chat. Fantastic. And if you'd like to use these cartoons in your practice, please feel free to the event organizers. We are able to share them if you want to use them for non-profit purposes and any climate-related work. You're welcome to use them in your work and your practice. Fantastic. I think, Sheila, we can resume the webinar and we'll see what comments are coming up. I'll share them with the cartoon artists for sure. And please be in touch. And I hope this inspires you to have candid conversation involving humor when we are talking about complex problems like early warning systems. Sheila, over to you.
No, thank you, Bettina. Thanks for the interactive session. We will review the comments as we move along. And now we want to look at the role of the media in the early warning chain. What role do the media play in terms of the intermediaries? So Irene was kind enough to share her video. So I'll ask Jose to play the video. We'll listen in, and then we could put our comments as well in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Irene Scott and I'm the Humanitarian Director at Internews. We're an international NGO that works in crisis contexts to ensure people have access to quality information to inform decision making and to hold power to account. We've seen how localized, relevant and timely information can support individuals and communities to plan and prepare, to rebuild and recover and to foster locally led solutions. Information is a critical form of aid in itself. So today I've been asked to make the case for why media is such a critical piece of the puzzle when it comes to early warning. And I think the point I want to start with is that the term media can present an incredibly diverse landscape of actors, and not all media are going to be the kind of actor you want sitting around the table for these discussions. So it's really important to start with an understanding of not just what media exist in your context, but what role they already play in the information ecosystem for your community. So are they accessible? Are they trusted? Are they considered biased or balanced? So a couple of reasons media can be a valuable partner in early warning. One is that rapid dissemination of information. They have the ability to get the message out quickly, sometimes to a really large and diverse audience. Even smaller operators can really fill the gap to get information to distinct communities that might miss out on the more generic warnings and alerts. There are the psychosocial benefits from hearing from someone you know, and people are much more likely to share and act on information coming from a source they know and trust. And they can facilitate a two-way channel of communication. So most media, but radio in particular, has the ability to not just warn the community, but open up a line of communication, allowing them to also collect first-hand data from communities about damage alerts, community needs, and to track and respond to misinformation. And of course, response transparency. Media organizations can provide continuous updates and alerts, but they can also educate the community about ways to prepare and the voice that helps to demystify a crisis, explaining decisions and processes, highlighting services that might be available to people. So there are a few reasons media can be part of early warning, but let me chat to you about some of the barriers that make it a little bit hard for media to participate. A big one is a lack of coordination. So despite often being mentioned in national disaster management strategies, media often don't have regular access to emergency services or government agencies. And this lack of coordination can really lead to the dissemination of incorrect or outdated information, which undermines the reliability of warnings. They're often thought of as just a dissemination channel and not valued for their contextual or risk communication expertise. So bringing in media at the end of a risk communication chain really prevents them from influencing the design of communication approaches. And there's often a trust deficit in the relationship. Let's be honest, emergency responders and media don't always trust each other. And our research at Internews has shown that actors on all sides lack an understanding of each other's priorities, processes, and ways of working, and that can make it incredibly difficult to collaborate and share information. And resources, staffing shortages, technical issues, financial constraints, all affect the timeliness and the quality of the information they can provide. So what can we do about it? Really quickly, here are a couple of practical steps you can consider when engaging with the media on this. So one is engage yesterday. The earlier media have a seat at the table in the design of early warning, the more chance you're going to generate buy-in, you're going to be able to draw on their expertise and maybe understand their barriers to participation. Establish some formal communication channels that allow regular briefings, shared access to real-time data, joint simulations and assessments that also include potential impact on broadcast infrastructure. You can provide training and resources because now that you've engaged early, well done on that, you have the time to work with the media to make sure they understand the threats, how the wider response works and how to engage with it. And consider this not just training, but capacity bridging, because media can also be an incredibly useful resource in testing out your early warning information, looking for what makes sense, where there might be room for misinterpretation or confusion, and of course, which communities might be left out. And of course, creating standardized protocols, co-creating together protocols to ensure guidelines for verifying information, warning alert templates, sounds, standards for managing misinformation. All of this helps to ensure consistency and reliability in the information being shared and greatly contributes to the trust the communities place in this information. So thank you for listening. And if you take anything away from this short presentation, I do want to stress the point that no one actor can be responsible for warning the community in the face of danger. It needs to be a collaborative effort between government, forecasters, first responders, media, other trusted information providers, and importantly, the community. So their participation is a critical element to ensure that warnings are relevant and to ensure no one is left behind. So thank you, and my email is there if anyone would like to continue this discussion.
Great. No, thank you. That was a very interactive video from Irene. I think she did an amazing job there on explaining the role of the media as an intermediary. I would like to welcome Stefania. Stefania works with the Netherlands Red Cross as the head of the water advisory unit. Welcome, Stefania. She'll take us through the early warning for all initiative, more focusing on the water at the heart of climate action programming. Welcome, Stefania.
Thank you, Sheila. And as you have heard from the previous speakers, this is really about finding a new way of working. When we first engaged with the Dutch government back at the UN Water Summit, this is what we were all searching. We need a new way of working in order to tackle the climate challenge and accelerate the work to enhance the resilience to the climate vulnerabilities of communities. A couple of things need to change. First of all, we need to look at the water and climate together. Most of the manifestation of the climate crisis is through water, and that's where the Netherlands government, together with the Red Cross and other global actors, can really make a change. The other thing that needs to change is really the way of working. We need to stop working in silos, have you heard from the presentation of Jörg? This is why the Water at the Heart Climate Action Initiative put together global actors that really could tackle water at the heart of climate action from different angles, specifically 4 different angles. The water-related policy and the disaster risk knowledge and governance, the data side, observation, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting of water-related hazard, the focus of this seminar, that is early warning system, dissemination and communication, and finally, anticipatory action and locally led adaptation. And here in the 4th pillar, you see another different way of working, anticipating the disaster and at the same time, actions that enhance the resilience. Because as I always say, you can have the perfect early warning system, but nobody wants to go back and live in a village without water. In order to do this, you have to bring together a globally mandated organization and their local counterparts. This is why we work together, the Red Cross, so the IFRC network, here identified with not only with the Netherlands Red Cross, but with the all IFRC, so the coordination system, and the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center. We work together with the national society in the country of focus of water at the heart of climate action, that at the moment are in the Nile Basin, Uganda, South Sudan, Sudan, and Ethiopia, and Rwanda. The policy angle is led by UNDRR as a globally mandated organization. The data angle is led by 2 organizations. One is the World Meteorological Organization working with the hydromet services in country, and the other one is the Scientific Observation Facilities that is also connected to WMO, but it's an independent organization that focuses on making sure that the data infrastructure on land is actually present. So being able to fill the data gap that there is in areas like the Nile Basin, but in turn also increasing the accuracy of the observation globally. The 3rd and the 4th area, so early warning system, dissemination and communication, and anticipatory action and locally led adaptation are led by the Red Cross. And this is because of the community angle. We all have the same goal, to accelerate and scale up water action to reduce impacts and increase the resilience of the most vulnerable. You see here organizations separated by these lines, but actually we are now 1 year into, we have now completed this inception year. And what we really realize is that we have to take out these lines. We really have to work together as one body in order to bring, tackle together this challenge. Thank you, and back to you, Sheila.
Thank you, Stefania, for unpacking the early warning system and explaining the role of each partner within the 4 components. And now we'll start off with Ramesh to get into the details of what really impact-based forecasting means within the framework of the early warning system. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you, moderator, and it's my pleasure to be here and present on behalf of WMO a presentation on early warning, official sources of early warning system, as well as impact-based forecasting, how it is being carried out at country level. Yeah, next slide, please. Based on various researchers studies carried out at various level, we know that early warning save lives and provide a tenfold return on investment, and also the damages caused by any disaster can be reduced by 30% if early warning is issued within 24 hours. So these are some previous studies which has been carried out, and this is a motivating factor for many countries to ensure they have a good and accurate early warning system that is very important in terms of carrying out early or necessary action. Looking at this, I think WMO for last 75 years has been supporting national meteorological and hydrological services to improve their weather, water, and climate services, especially in terms of providing early warning services as well as advisory messages on various sectors like agriculture, water resource management, marine, aviation. So it has been like for last 75 years, WMO providing necessary guidance, capacity, and ensuring the necessary capabilities are available at the national level. Why? Because NMHS, National Meteorological and Hydrological Services, they have the necessary mandate and responsibility at the country level to monitor various hydrometeorological hazards, and then based on forecasting, provide necessary warning services to various stakeholders at country level, mainly coming from various other agencies as well as international organization. And in turn, basically these agency receiving warning are providing support to communities in terms of improving their adaptation as well as resilience. But early warning is not easy to be developed. I think we had a survey done in 2022, and based on our survey, we came to know that only half of WMO members have a multi-hazard early warning system in place, and there are significant gaps in observation, especially considering least developed countries in Africa and even small island developing states, and also other areas where maybe the country has an early warning system, but it is not multi-hazard, or maybe it is not covering the entire country. So looking at all this, I think early warning for all was mandated by UN Secretary General in 2022, mainly to ensure that everyone on this planet is covered by an early warning system in next 5 years. Next slide. But in terms of going for early warning for all, it is very important also to ensure that we are not just providing warnings, but it is more as an impact based related, so that people know that how the weather will be translated into how does the weather will impact us or impact you. So it's very important to have this transition going forward, and in order to reach that, we not only need weather or hazard related information, but it's very important to have social and structural data available that is used together with hazard information, and then we can calculate how much impact it could provide in case any hazard has a potential to come in, and what could be necessary action or decision we should take in terms of ensuring that the impact on lives, livelihood, or even on ecosystem is limited or minimized to zero. Next slide. Here is an example of one of the WMO project which was done in West Africa, mainly to say that from Ghana, when the project started in 2020, they were issuing only weather warnings, and based on the project, we worked with them to in order to collect some risk information to ensure that the risk information includes one even some socioeconomic information like on population density, in terms of digital elevation model. All this social and structural information was collected together with hydromet data and information, and now we have an impact-based forecast system. So 3 years after the project started, now the countries are issuing an impact-based forecast where we know that what kind of hazard it will come in and what are the potential risk it could bring in terms of impacting livelihoods, as well as on environment. And based on this impact-based forecasting, Ghana Meteorological Agency has been issuing warning to various agency, also providing some kind of advisories or action that national agencies or even population should take in order to minimize any kind of damage. Next slide, please. So here is the last slide where I wanted to put in some key points to be considered. Early warning system should be co-designed with various stakeholders involved in the end-to-end value chain. We say in our way, like it starts from data collection. We talk about hydromet data, social structural data, how this data is injected in various model, meteorological, hydrological model. And when we generate a forecast, it's more as an impact-based forecast, which allows us to disseminate warning to various level, from regional level to national, sub-national to the community. And then there is a necessary tool available in terms of ensuring there is a timely risk informed decision making that happens, and then necessary response to warnings are carried out. As I said, forecasting is not enough. We have to move rather to impact based forecasting that allows population as well as various stakeholders to understand what this hazard could bring us in terms of impact and how best we can minimize it. Early warning should be timely and accurate. If not, then it's of no use, and even it should be communicated in various modes like SMS, email, audio messages, whatever is the requirement. We need to adapt to that situation, and then we need to ensure that at local level, community as the first responders are provided with necessary knowledge and skills to act or take action. Finally, most important thing, after any disaster event, it's very important to go back and get some feedback and verify in the entire chain of end-to-end early warning value chain, and to ensure that we keep improving, we keep enhancing our data collection mechanism, using the data for modeling, forecasting, improving the impact-based forecast for early warning services. And in that way, we will ensure that the impact we create or impact to any hazard is minimized, or it is leading to zero losses. So that's all from my side. Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Ramesh, for the clear explanation on from the producer's perspective. And I think one of the roles that that the WMO will be playing within this What at the Heart is ensure that the decentralization of the impact-based forecasting, and that's why we are working very closely with the WMO at the different country levels. Good. So we move to the second. Phoebe, I think it's your turn now to look into the role of the policies and within the disaster management structure of the early warning system. Welcome, Phoebe.
Thank you very much, Sheila. Please allow me not to turn on my video because of internet bandwidth. So this evening, I'll be taking you through how the early warning messaging flows through the National Disaster Management System. And we can go to the next slide. I'll just start by kind of echoing what my colleagues have mentioned, that when it comes to the early warning systems or the value chain, it's not a standalone, or one section cannot just say it's a standalone. Next slide, please. Yes, I was saying that the early warning system is a value chain, and we need to ensure that the risk knowledge aspect speaks to the monitoring and warning, and it speaks to the dissemination and communication, as well as also the response and capabilities of the lessons learned from each of those different segments feedback into each other. Now, looking at the national disaster management authorities, they play a critical role when it comes to helping to develop and make available climate services that are or support our communities when it comes to decision making needs. Please go to the next slide. Specifically, I want to mention that the National Disaster Management Authorities, one, they support or facilitate knowledge brokering, and this knowledge brokering enhances, one, the design as well as also the delivery of climate services that are better tailored to meet the users' needs, as well as also facilitate and maintain links between actors at different levels who play a critical role. I want to point out two key important points before I take us through how an example of early warning would flow through a national disaster management authority. The first one is that for National Disaster Management Authority, as part of their knowledge brokering, they support multi-stakeholder engagements and as well as also provide dialogue platforms. And these multi-stakeholder engagements as well as dialogue platforms, they enable stakeholders to be able to, one, share, filter, as well as also integrate and interpret information from the producers, who are usually our meteorological and hydrological agencies, to as well all the way to the users across different disciplines, across different sectors, but also most important, across levels, in a way that they're co-producing together, in a way that they're producing information that is relevant for decision making among the communities who are most affected. The second point is that national disaster management authorities, they support a two-way communication as well as feedback and learning. It's not just enough to communicate, it's enough to receive feedback from the users of this particular information so that it can support the improvement of the different products that are being developed, as well as also the different processes that are utilized when it comes to ensuring that early warning system reaches the intended users, is relevant to them, and it's effective enough to be able to support them in their decision making as well as in their planning context. Enabling two-way communication also allows for the users to be able to understand how they can be able to access this information, how they can utilize this information, and therefore they can also be able to provide feedback in case they need additional information that needs to be provided to these particular products that are released. Now, looking at an example of how early warning flows in a national disaster management authority, we have our National Meteorological and Hydrological Services providing us scientific knowledge. And of course, this scientific knowledge is usually complemented by indigenous knowledge systems that comes from our communities. And you can see there's an arrow coming from the disaster committee who feed back into our meteorological agencies. Once this information is produced, the Met Agency produces its information. Hydromet offices also produces its information. It goes to the forecasting center. The forecasting center is able to release the early warnings information, which is then transmitted to our national disaster management authorities, who together with the early warning system technical working group, where we have the multi-stakeholder platform, they come together, look at the early warning information that has been produced, they co-generate advisories and interpret what this warning information means to them. They then communicate this to the media teams, who are able then to share this information to the communities, most of the time directly through radios and television. But again, through the national disaster management authorities, they're able to pass this information to their regional disaster management teams, who go further down to co-produce with the regional early warning systems technical working group, so that they're able to contextualize and make sure that this information captures the local realities and adapts that information to that. Of course, the regional disaster management authorities, in close collaboration with the national non-governmental organization and other stakeholders, then transmit this information to communities, but also working very closely with the local disaster risk management committees. They're able to work with them so that this information is also taken to the disaster committees that are usually at the village level or are usually at the community level. You will see that when it comes from information coming from the disaster management at the national level to the regional level to the local level, it's a two-way communication to ensure that we have feedback, but also to ensure that this learning that is always generated between all these teams as much as possible. And also the same is between the technical working groups and the disaster management authorities at the national level, local level, and also at the regional level. Our communities then receive this information through various means, including the media, as I mentioned before, non-governmental organizations, but also through the local disaster risk management committees as well as disaster committees. And then they are able to share this information among themselves through other things such as drums, whistles, cell phone, meeting, amongst other things. Something to mention is that when it comes to coordination, the disaster risk management authorities make sure that there is coordination from the national level, regional level, and local level. Yes, there's still a lot that needs to be done moving forward in terms of strengthening this coordination, but ideally, whatever is happening at the national level should be reflected at the local level. And that's why I mentioned the national disaster management authorities being or with their knowledge brokering role, they support the multi-stakeholder engagements, which support in ensuring that all this coordination is reflected across all the different levels. It ensures that we have timely communication for use of the early warning system for decision making as well as action, which is what most of us are talking about today, and also ensuring that users are able to access, understand, but also interpret all this. Finally, our national disaster management authorities, with support from the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, we also work on supporting or strengthening national policies to ensure that we don't just stop at early warning, but we are also ensuring that anticipatory action is mainstreamed and financing for the same is provided by either the county governments or local or regional governments, as well as the national governments, and coordination is strengthened at all levels. I'll stop at that, Sheila. Back to you.
No, thank you, Phoebe, for taking us through the role of UNDRR in terms of strengthening coordination and ensuring that the information we get from the end user is also incorporated in the policies. So I'd like to welcome Emmanuel and Tale. This session we've heard from the producers and the role of intermediaries from the media. We also want to hear now from the end user perspective, what does the Red Cross play in terms of ensuring no one is left behind in an event of a disaster. So Emmanuel will give us practical examples, real insights from Uganda Red Cross. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Yes, thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon. Emmanuel here in Uganda. Nice to be here. I hope my audio is coming through. Next slide. With my presentation, I will share insights on how, from Uganda Red Cross Society and the Red Cross largely, we are ensuring that the information reaches the community, that we leave no one behind. Next slide. So I will start by painting a picture of the role of the Red Cross in early warning. Specifically in Uganda, the Red Cross works through a network of branches and volunteers at the community level. These volunteers are part of the community, and they are one of the key structures for early warning and also other disaster risk management activities at the community level. But also, the Red Cross is part of the National Emergency Coordination and Operations structure. In Uganda, this is established under the Office of the Prime Minister, but by policy, by legal framework, the Uganda Red Cross has a role both at that level, at the district level as part of the District Disaster Management Committee, the sub-county, and down to the village level, where we are part of the village disaster management committees. But also the Red Cross here in Uganda and largely has been instrumental in pioneering activities like anticipatory action approaches, which are looking at using forecasts to inform actions across the last mile, the community level. When I talk about communities, next slide, the communities here and also largely is rather a complex ecosystem that has so many things that are interlinked. We are dealing with social cultural factors. These are like beliefs, networks, and perceptions. For example, here in Uganda, even if you had a forecast that is quite accurate, where you're very sure, like 90% of precision and accuracy, there will still be significant portions of the communities that will choose not to take action based on that information. This is because of trust and perception. But trust is not the same as the skill. So even if you invested a significant portion of resources in making sure you have the forecast right, it's not automatic that it will translate into actions across the last mile. So you find most of our interventions within the Red Cross, Uganda Red Cross, and also largely is how we look at these different factors that drive actions in a holistic, inclusive, and adaptive way to ensure that information translates into action. We have issues to do with economic inequalities across diversity, environmental variability. We have information gaps. We have communities that do not allow specific segments of the communities like women to listen to radio, to watch the TV. These are beliefs that are also barriers to information if we are to talk about information. And also different behaviors across the communities. So the Red Cross in Uganda, and largely, we use inclusive approaches and strategies to ensure that we leave no one behind. Next slide. For example, we use community radios as one of the tools to disseminate information. When I talk about community radios, I mean community-owned, community-managed approaches, which are accessible across locations that don't have like a frequency. They are trusted by the communities. The presenters, though the people who use these radios are part of the communities, and they are inclusive in a way. So some of these and many more other approaches have been instrumental to ensure that we reach the last mile with information and also with action. Next slide. There are many more tested approaches and strategies that we are using within the Red Cross movement. I know we are using them within Uganda Red Cross and across many other national societies, like community engagement and accountability approaches, which are instrumental key for driving change and uptake of information, enhanced vulnerability capacity assessments, cash and virtual assistance, community-based disaster risk reduction groups. These are tested in Uganda. We've been using such approaches for a while, and we have solid and concrete examples on how this ensures that the last of the least members of the communities benefit from these actions. And as I conclude, this is an enhanced vulnerability capacity assessment. This is initiated by the communities. It's done by the communities. Communities are able to spell out their own vulnerabilities and design interventions on how they can deal with some of these vulnerabilities, like risk assessments, identifying hotspot locations within their communities, even designing very specific community action plans on some of the interventions they are going to do to avert some of the vulnerabilities that are identified from these different assessments at that level. So I will end there with my presentation, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. And at this point, I'd also like to welcome Saskia from the Oxford University. Her session also gives us an opportunity to utilize learnings through this whole process that we are looking at strengthening and improving the all early warning system chain. So over to you, Saskia.
Thanks very much, Sheila. Hi, everyone. So I've been asked to reflect a bit on how we might integrate water quality information into early warning systems. I'm coming from this, coming into this conversation from quite a different perspective than the previous speakers. I work mostly on water quality risk communication, looking at how information can be useful to help water managers and also water users address water quality risks. This includes a research component, but also a lot of implementation work, working with water service providers and governments to design water quality monitoring and reporting programs. So for those who may be familiar, this is work with Uptime Global, with service providers like Fundifix in Kenya and Haisawa through the Safe Pani program in Bangladesh. And a lot of the work that we do is kind of more for a business as usual state of affairs, ongoing water supply operations. But I think there are some useful learnings that we can take from that work to consider how water quality information might be included in early warning systems. And partly this is because one of the objectives of the work we're doing to develop water service delivery models is to try and improve the climate resilience of water supplies. So there's overlap. Basically, what we're trying to do is lay groundwork to improve preparation for responding to hazards. And I don't have time to go into the details of how that we're doing that. But one of the main takeaways that I wanted to share from this work is that communicating, we've been finding over and over, and this is supported in wider research as well, that communicating about water quality issues, about hazards, is only a first step and doesn't lead to better risk management unless there are clear response actions linked to the information. And I think that echoes what other speakers have said today. We know from decades of research that people's behavior is influenced not just by what they perceive as a threat, but also what they think can be done about it. So if people don't think that there are effective measures that they could take personally or that could be used to protect from a hazard, they're very likely to develop a defensive kind of cognitive framing or defensive position and actually ignore or disregard hazard warnings. So it follows from this that hazard warning information systems need to be sensitive to the fact that people are starting from very different perspectives and are going to react to hazard information very differently. So understanding how the information intersects with different vulnerabilities in communities is really important. And this is what we've found again and again with the water quality work. And it's something that aligns with what other speakers have emphasized today. So in a nutshell, the value of hazard warning information is dependent on how closely it's linked with feasible response actions. And so we've found in our work that it's more effective to focus on the response actions first. What are the protections, treatments, preparations, what needs to be done to mitigate the hazard? What do we need to do in order to make these kind of activities feasible? And a big part of that is prioritizing. We can't think about all of the water quality hazards at once. So what do we focus on first? And then work backwards from that to see where responsibilities need to be clarified, ways of working, and then come to thinking about what information systems are going to support all of that. So rather than starting with a focus on what hazard information maybe exists or could be made available, it's more starting with the response and working backwards to think about what would be useful to share. So to wrap up, I think that there is scope to bring water quality hazards into consideration for early warning systems, but if we're going to be moving towards that, it's really important to approach it from this point of understanding that impact-based warnings are more effective if they're linked to feasible response pathways. So that means empowerment of individuals to take protective actions and use the information. And I think that that's a main takeaway from this session that all of the speakers have really been aligned on. So to just leave it with the big open question, which is therefore, if we're going to bring water quality into early warning systems, who are going to be the key stakeholders or receivers of that information, and what are they expected to do with it?
Thank you, Saskia. I also see we are almost at the hour, but I'm very grateful to the panelists. You've been very engaging, addressing questions on the channel. So that's super appreciated. And I think some of you have shared your email addresses. Let's continue having the conversation. So I'll hand over to the closing remarks from Teddy. It's been a pleasure being your moderator. Thank you so much. Over to you, Teddy, for the closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was an interesting session as informed. Okay, I would love to know if I'm clear as I'm concluding. That's
better, Teddy. So just keep where you are. Don't move.
Okay, so like in a nutshell, there are a lot of points that have come out, especially I also try to emphasize, especially on the first presentation, where I got 2 points, which comes to poor coordination, and there is also poor investment when it comes to, these issues. And also one thing that has grabbed my attention is that we need communities to be involved in actually decision making, because I see most of the time you find that we sit at these panels, we talk on behalf of the communities, but do we involve people who are actually in the communities to be with us and also to share their experiences? And also going up to the second presentation on early warnings using cartoon galleries, I saw that was good. And especially when you talk about inclusivity, because I'm also an advocate for persons with disabilities, I feel it can also help somebody who has a disability, like interpret the messages, especially when you use those visual talking about people who have, hearing impairment and all that. Yeah, so on the other presentation, talking about the role of media in the communication chain, I feel it's also good to be careful with the information that we take out there, because everyone nowadays is trying to communicate using media, and I feel we need to create like trusted sources, especially to form good information. And one point that I got the process, we also need response to stakeholders. So I also just rushed down on the water as the heart of climate action. I know it's important. We can't separate issues to deal with climate change and when it comes to water. I'll give a practical example. When it comes to Zambia, we are facing a hydroelectricity challenge, and farmers are being affected. The food chain is also being affected. And I feel there's need to do more interventions when it comes to getting down to the community. As the last speaker says, we need also to focus much also on the solutions first, because we are good at warning the society, but are we telling them what to do after that? To the presenters that took their time, I know time is not our best ally. We have already concluded. I feel they have put their all, and we need to, also take more actions when it comes to the ground. And I emphasize, because as a youth-led organization, we also use media as a tool for advocacy, as a tool for social change. I feel we can transform somebody and we can bring relevant information when it comes to media. Thank you very much, and that's it. Goodbye.
Thank you all, and we've come to the end of the session. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for the panelists for joining as well. Have a great evening. Bye for now.